Hey everybody, this is Tyler Lochner with Pro Football Focus Fantasy, and I'm just here to talk a little bit about the Aaron Hernandez news yesterday and what it means for fantasy footballers. So just being on Twitter yesterday, it seemed like the big topics, the big areas of interest were the impact on Tom Brady, what Jake Ballard, what his role might be, the impact on the running backs, Shane Vereen and Stephen Ridley, as well as who might pick up the slack. Will it be Aaron Dobson or Josh Boyce? Will it be Edelman? Who's that going to be? So starting with the big man on top, Tom Brady, what does this mean for him? He now has lost 77% of the people he targeted last year are no longer on the roster. With Welker gone, with Branch gone, Lloyd, Hernandez now gone. If Gronk remains injured for an extended period of time, that fully changes the offense. But either way, the offense is not going to look the same as it did last year. So what does it mean for Brady? Well, before the Aaron Hernandez news, Brady was still a top 3 fantasy football option. Now I think he's more of a 4th or 5th, more of a top 5 quarterback option. I think he was being drafted in the 4th rounds. I think he now slides down to the 5th, maybe early 6th round. But look, it's still Tom Brady we're talking about here. People forget that from 2001 to 2006, he didn't play with superstars. It wasn't until he got Randy Moss and Wes Welker in 2007 that he really started throwing for a bazillion yards and 50 million touchdowns every single year. But he was still, tops in the league a couple times. In 2002, he led the league in touchdown passes. It was only 28, but it was still the league-leading number. In 2005, he led the league in passing yards. So it's Tom Brady. He's a perennial All-Pro option. Since 2007, he's always been in the MVP talks. Regardless of who's around him, I still think he's going to put in the numbers, and he'll adapt to those who are around him. And in addition to Tom Brady adapting to those around him, that means that the whole New England offense is going to adapt to those around them, which means that without Hernandez, the 2 tight end set I think it's going to kind of go out the window. So what does that mean for Jake Ballard, the new tight end option that's coming in? A lot of people seem to think that Ballard is just going to come in and get all the volume that Hernandez was getting, and that's not true. Hernandez was actually a little bit more of a wide receiver. He was lined up as a wide receiver about 60% of the time. He had an ADOT, an average depth of target, of 7.4 last year. It was only 7.1 in 2011, so last year wasn't an anomaly. And just to put that into a bigger picture, Wes Welker actually had an ADOT of 7.7. So Welker was targeted further down the field than Hernandez, just to get you an idea of how Hernandez was really used in the offense. But they still have Gronkowski, who will go down the seam there. And so I don't think Ballard is going to come in and replace Gronkowski unless, obviously he's not going to come in and replace Gronkowski. I just meant they're not going to use them the same way, unless Gronkowski ends up getting injured. So I do think that Ballard has some fantasy value. I actually picked him up in the Pro Football Focus Dynasty League. I only spent $5 out of our $200 budget, but I still wanted him on the roster, even if it was only for the first couple of weeks of the season while Gronkowski got up to full speed. Because if Gronk does miss time or gets re-injured, Ballard will see the targets, especially within the red zone. New England has grown accustomed to passing to tight ends, down near the end zone. But I think once Gronk comes back, the 2 tight end set won't really be an option because, Gronk and Hernandez complemented each other so well. And I think once Gronkowski's back, Ballard goes to the bench, his fantasy value pretty much becomes nil. But he still becomes an interesting late-round option just because Gronkowski does have the injury concerns now. He's been injured back-to-back seasons. He hasn't been healthy this offseason. So it's definitely an interesting thing to keep an eye on. Now, what does this mean for the running backs, Shane Vereen and Stephen Ridley? Last year, Ridley was a solid running back option, mostly because of the number of touchdowns he was able to score. Now, I think New England's offense is still going to be able to score touchdowns. They might not score them at will anymore, but they're still going to rely on Ridley down by the goal line. He's still going to rack up, I think, over 10 touchdowns. But with their Aaron Hernandez news now, with Aaron Hernandez now no longer on the team, I think that Ridley will be relied on a little bit more to take some of the pressure off of Tom Brady outside of the 5-yard line. So I think in addition to his touchdowns, he's gonna rack up a little bit more yards. Even if it's only 4 more carries a game, that could be 20 more yards a game. And that matters in the fantasy football world. So I think that Ridley goes from kind of teetering between the 2nd or 3rd round in fantasy football drafts. I think he's now a slam dunk 2nd round pick. And And then Vereen, the other running back option, he was lining himself up to be a flex option this year. And with Aaron Hernandez now out of the picture, Hernandez, as we talked about a little bit earlier, was kind of the shorter mid-range pass option. And I think New England, even though they're going to change the way their offense operates, I think they're still going to be operating the short passing game, which is where Vereen really comes in and will thrive. So in PPR leagues, Vereen is definitely a flex option. Remember last year, Woodhead, who was the number 2 running back on the depth chart, was a flex option. He ended the season, I think, as the running back 24, somewhere around there, just off the top of my head. So Vereen will definitely be an option, definitely worth a little bit later of a round pick. In PPR leagues, don't sleep on him, because those flex options can rack up the points and really change what happens in your fantasy football games. Now, some other people have talked about Jimmy Graham now being kind of a great choice in the first round. And I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think it really depends on your league scoring settings. I touched on this a little bit in my article, which you should read just for a little bit more details. But Graham, yes, he's going to be much, much better than every other tight end option, except for Gronkowski, maybe. Really depends on Gronk's health, which is impossible to guess. But I think that it really depends on your league scoring settings as to whether or not Jimmy Graham is now a slam dunk first round pick. So study that. Don't just hear what people say and just go do it. You have to really know what your own league rules are. So those are kind of the 3 big things. The impact on Tom Brady. He slides down a little bit, but he's still a top 5 quarterback option. What is Jake Ballard? Who is he? What's it going to be? And then the impact on the running backs, Vereen and Ridley. I think they both get a slight boost. And then the other big thing is who's going to pick up the targets that Aaron Hernandez would receive. And I personally think it's going to be Aaron Dobson. The Patriots spent the second round pick on him this year. He's a little bit more of the stretch the field type of player. Even though Hernandez had a low average depth of target, he had great yards after the catch. So he was able to stretch the field that way, and I think that's the player they're going to need. I don't think that Julian Edelman will be lined up opposite of Danny Amendola. I just don't think that the Patriots will have both of those players on the field at the same time too much. I think Aaron Dobson's going to win the battle in camp for that wide receiver 2 position, so I think that he might be worth a late round flyer in that New England offense. So their offense is going to look different. There's no doubt about that. That's not just because of the Aaron Hernandez news, but while Tom Brady slides, the running backs go up a little bit. Gronkowski remains the same. He's going to be the seam option. He's going to be Brady's favorite target, especially in the red zone. So New England's offense is definitely going to look different, but there's still going to be some great fantasy football options on that team. So thanks for watching, and happy drafting, football fans.